Rocket in the sky, catch your eye, please don't cry, wait goodbye. I survived all them dark cold nights. Star, I am bright, I don't die, I won't lie. I'm just trying to be the best I could be.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Sober Stew podcast. You're listening to and watching an addiction recovery podcast. Today, all the way from the USA, North Carolina, I believe, we have Spencer Bland. Welcome to the show, Spencer.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you for having me. This is a pretty cool opportunity, and I'll try not to mess it up too much, considering it's my first podcast, so we'll see where it goes.
No, mate, listen, look, wicked. I really appreciate you coming on. Do you know what? I'm a heterosexual male, yeah, but I look at your Instagram page and I think to myself, man, that's a good Instagram page, I tell you. You've been working out a lot.
Thank you. No, I can't take much credit. My wife is pretty darn good at that social media thing, so it's just using my story and her skills, to say the least.
Do you know what? Right, I'm gonna ask them big questions because I ask everyone to fill out a fact find when they're going to come on the show. And you know, when you sent yours over, you know, you put a lot of effort into that as well, and you done like a timeline, didn't you, on a life story? And I read through it. There's snippets. There's not long like paragraphs of writing, but there's snippets. And I was like, fucking hell, man! Like, Spencer, you've had a life story. Yeah, that's a heavy duty life story, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's not your average kind of grow up story. You know, not to say that mine is worse, or you know, because I've always heard that the worst thing that's happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you. You know.
No, listen, I appreciate that, and do you know what? One of the main things here that I initially saw was both your grandmother and your biological mother both died of addiction. Is that true?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. My grandmother. I guess, you know, if you don't mind, I'll kind of go through the timeline a little bit.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Please do.
So I was born in Washington State, over on the west side of the United States, with my father and mother, and my dad was a tugboat captain, and he'd be gone for, you know, weeks to months at a time. And kind of my first memory is when my biological mother shot my dad. In front of me, there was like a big argument, big accident, and well, not accident. She went and grabbed the pistol and shot him twice right in the side in front of me. And he just got off of work, and the bullets went through his chest and landed in the inside of his Carhartt pocket. And he ended up crawling over to the neighbor's house. My mother picked me up and took me over there and was screaming that, you know, he's lying, he's making it all up, you know, while he's bleeding out. Cops end up coming, and from there, that kind of broke up the nuclear family, more or less. And this was in the 90s when the mother got preferential treatment, you know, as far as, you know, where a child goes. And she claimed self-defense. He was in the hospital, and from that point on, she suffered from mental illness. At the time, I didn't really understand, you know, what was going on. I was 3-4 years old, and she would have me go look underneath, you know, the vehicle for bombs. She thought people were after her, and she thought paintings were talking to her. Right. And my dad fought for me, and, you know, tried to get me back. He suffered for alcoholism, you know, his entire life, and at the time, obviously, I didn't know that, but throughout that time, he got witness accounts from neighbors in the area, and she would leave for hours at a time and leave me, you know, basically in a diaper in the rain, you know, and I would go to neighbors' houses asking for food, and it was just not a very good situation. Oh, and eventually he ended up winning in the court, and I ended up going to live with my grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandfather ended up passing away shortly after that, so it was just me and her, because he had so many lawyer fees and bills he had to keep up with. He had to go on the tug, and he was gone, you know, for a good part of a year trying to make up the loss of work that he had and pay off these lawyers. And I always remember I was about 4 years old or so, and she always had a glass of water that I thought was water. And she would always be reading a book. And at the tip of a hat, for whatever reason, her entire mood would change. You know, she would completely transform in front of me into this different person. And, you know, being 4 years old, I really didn't understand why. You know, she would become erratic and start yelling and screaming. And that went on for about a year. And, you know, I'd find her sometimes laying on the floor, you know, not being able to get up, and I'd have to help her up. You know, my little 4-year-old body, you know, trying to pick up my grandmother, not understanding why she did that. And, you why she would fall down. And from that point, my father ended up meeting my stepmother in California, and she was from Western Pennsylvania. And once they met, we started living up in Washington again. And my mother, she ended up going away to some type of mental institute she was unfit through the court system, her mental stability. Still to this day, I really don't know where she went. But apparently there were threats that whenever she said she was getting out, she was gonna come find me, take me back and kill my dad. So we basically fled from Washington down to California. And he went back to work, and this was the only time basically in my life that I had kind of two parents in one place at a time, where I had my stepmother that I loved dearly, and my father was working a lot, but there was a lot of domestic violence going on. Cops were getting called with his alcoholism. And his problem was he would change too. He would, once he started drinking, it was like that Jekyll and Hyde. His face would morph, his personality would completely change, and a lot of fights. And from that point, I tried to go to first grade there, and I was falling behind. I didn't have any formal education before that, and they ended up pulling me out of first grade. I don't know why they did this, but they sent me to go live in Ohio with my stepmother's brother, wife, and two kids that I never knew in Eastern Ohio. And I repeated first grade, and I was going to live there for 2 years. And while I was living there, I kind of call it hell in a dome. They lived in a dome house, a circular house, and he built it. And he wasn't around much at all. He was working at the steel mills in Western PA, and my step aunt at the time, she had one leg. We were in the middle of nowhere, living in a dome house, with these two older cousins, a boy and a girl, and they were older than me. I'm going into first grade. They were like fifth, sixth, or seventh grade, kind of coming up teenagers. And that was probably one of the toughest 2 years that I've dealt with, in my childhood. There was a lot of abuse and neglect that went on with them. I mean, everything from locking me and my other cousin in the basement for hours at a time. They'd let us up, putting us in cold showers, having to run across the backyard, getting shot with paintball guns, from urinating into mac and cheese and making us eat it, to having me walk down in a woman's dress while they played the marriage anthem, and made me and my other boy cousin do a fake wedding and have to kiss each other. And the mother wasn't around much either. She was working as a cosmetologist, and it was just a lot of kids kind of raising kids and just mayhem.
Yeah, man.
They had a bunch of acreage and kind of no rules, and I had no control of that. And I mean, they hold me down and put whipped cream and peanut butter on my genitalia and let the dog lick it off, in front of them, and just horrible stuff. And that went on for about 2 years. And I remember, being in first and second grade, 6, 7 years old, not wanting to live, not knowing why my parents, shipped me across the country while they are living in hotels. Because apparently they thought, because of my mother's threats, that we were on the run, essentially. But I didn't understand that at the time. I just felt like I was a throwaway kid, and my parents don't love me, and these kids are abusing me. And
How old was you then?
I was first and second grade, so 6, 7 years old.
And you felt like you didn't want to live then.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I remember it vividly, running down the hill one time. I was hitting golf balls and just saying, I just wish I wasn't here. Just not even worth it. And I started to act out a little bit too in school, and I brought a lighter to school, and spitting, in class, and just trying to act out in some type of way. And eventually I ended up getting out of that situation, and going to live with my dad in Washington again. So I ended up going to third grade in Washington, and for whatever reason, again, my stepmother went to Pennsylvania. So now I'm living with him, and he's working a lot, as a tugboat captain, like I said, and I've become pretty independent. Riding my bike places, friends' houses and whatnot, and that's kind of when I started to see alcohol, and seeing him show up and not knowing which version of my dad that I'm going to get. Am I going to get the loving, compassionate father, or the one that is going to give me lectures, on nonsense for an hour and a half? And he's a big guy. He's 6'3", and I'm just a little third grader. So lived there for that year. Oh, and I was also living with my grandmother at the time too. Like she would watch me as well during that. And I remember I was playing soccer, and she always had her glass of water, and like I said, always kind of morphed into this other person. And she had this big old Buick, this big white Buick, and I would sit in the front seat, and she would take me to soccer practice. And I believe it was like every Thursday or Friday. It was one day a week that we had practice, like on the other side of town, and I was always scared to death of it because it was this windy road, and I would just see the car going back and forth because she was, at this time I know, driving intoxicated, with a kid, and her braking was always delayed. I was always pushing my hands against the front of like where like the airbag would be to like stop the car, and obviously that wasn't doing anything. But a lot of kind of fight or flight situations I was in with that. And after third grade, for whatever reason, they sent me over to Pennsylvania to live with my stepmother in fourth grade, and he stayed back in Washington. And this was the first kind of like peace that I had growing up in Pennsylvania in fourth grade. Ended up meeting my long-term friend that's still my best friend to this day. My stepmother didn't drink at the time. I lived with my step grandmother as well, and she didn't drink at all. It was very, very calm that year, kind of starting to learn how to interact with kids, and not too much to say about that time of my life. But for whatever reason after that, I ended up flying back to Washington State again to live with my dad. And fifth grade and sixth grade, I was living with him, and that's when I started playing sports. And he was gone a lot, working, and I would ride my bike to baseball practice or football practice and take all my equipment with me. And he would usually end up showing up either halfway through practice, and sometimes he would show up and I could instantly tell in his face which version I'm getting. And is he going to be the one that, just watches practice quietly and, enjoys it, or the one that's going to interrupt practice and start to, heckle and almost harass, my playing in the middle of it?
Spencer, are you living as a child? Then are you living with permanent anxiety because of this?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I was able to bottle up a lot of that. On the outside, I was a very good, respectful kid. Very nice manners. It was almost like I was able to kind of detach from it and pride myself on moving on, because there was so much change that was almost part of my identity, that new people, new school, it was almost not a big deal to myself, but I wasn't addressing any of that. But being in those situations, yes. Yeah, dealing with what version of my dad am I going to get? And yeah, for fifth and sixth grade, lived there, and then seventh grade went back to Pennsylvania to live with my stepmother. And once seventh, eighth grade, ninth grade, that's kind of when I started to drink. That's when I started to use chewing tobacco, and I remember my buddy handed me my first beer, and it was a Keystone Pounder, 16 ounces, and said, "Chug it." And I remember chugging that thing, and it was almost like everything went away. This euphoria came over me, and you want to call it the nerve endings in my brain or whatever it is, lit up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I can feel that.
From that point on, throughout high school, everybody's drinking pretty hard and partying on the weekends. And in high school, I'm quote unquote successful, as like a high school kid can be, playing sports. I'm doing well in school and popular. So like my drinking was like kind of excused because like everybody else was doing it. I wasn't really getting in trouble, but I was definitely the one kind of leading the charge as far as taking it to the next levels of the drinking. But for the most part, pretty seamless through high school. My dad would come back and visit We ended up having like a falling out for about 10 years, after that. It was like about seventh grade on. We didn't talk for about 10 years, but my stepmother ended up starting to drink. She had big ambitions to go out to California, become an actress, and she ended up living in her small, bedroom that she grew up in high school, living with her mother and like not working. And that's kind of when her alcoholism started
Right.
coming into play. And where mine kind of started picking up was I went out to college, and in that area, you play football, you drink beer, and there's that pressure to go to college. Where are you going to college? And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I ended up going to a school because I was, supposed to, and I was playing football, and I changed my major like 5 different times. I had a girlfriend at the time, and then we broke up, and um, I was away from home, and that's when the drinking started to escalate more and more.
Can I ask you a question? You grew
Yeah.
up with this alcoholism,
Mhm.
these alcoholic people, family members, and other people all around you throughout your childhood, yeah, growing up. When you
Yeah.
started drinking and you felt that euphoria moment, um, did you think your drinking was wrong, or did you think it was normal from what you grew up with?
Unfortunately, kind of like a mix of both,
Right.
where alcohol culture in general, like everybody drinks. That's a normal thing. It's Friday,
Yeah.
it's Saturday, it's nice outside, it's bad outside.
Hmm.
The game's on, there's no game on. There's
Yeah.
always a reason to drink. So there's that part of it, and then my mental gymnastics that I was able to play on myself is that I didn't turn into my grandmother or I didn't turn into my dad. When I drank, I didn't become a jerk. I was fun. I was the life of the party. I got nicer. You know, I was exciting to be around until, a certain point of the blackout where, anything is up for game. But that's how I always justified it to myself. Like, I'm not like my dad, or I was able to detach of,
Hmm.
we're completely I'm not like him. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't drink like him, but everybody else drinks. So I'm just drinking. I'm going along to get along like everybody else.
It's
And,
painful, isn't it? Because it's like, I've sat here and listened to the way you've described your childhood, and then you're obviously starting into your alcoholic career, shall we call it? But
yeah,
I've kind of, when people tell me their story, I kind of put my mind as much as I can within that mindset. And that when you were 6, 7 years old and you had them feelings of not wanting to be here, that's heavy, like heavy duty. But what you went through, and then to still be successful in certain aspects in high school, and it sounds like the way the way you describe it is if it's like it's an everyday thing because it's your life and you lived it. I get that, but that's a very tough upbringing to live through. And I just want to say a massive congratulations for getting sober, man, because some people can use that history, that childhood, for a reason to carry on drinking day in, day out, day in, day out, because it's if you would drink if this happened to you kind of attitude. But you're a sober man, and I respect that a lot.
thank you, Stu. I really appreciate that. It's taken a long, long time, to get there and have that epiphany or,
Mm,
want that for myself because, alcohol, it does what it's supposed to do. It,
yeah.
it cures, any issue that you think you're having or, it makes you forget. Basically started to increase more with the drinking and almost like dangerously drinking because now I'm not successful and I'm out, in college, I'm changing my major, grades are going down, but I know what I'm good at and that's drinking. And, a couple different times throughout that first year, beer bonging, 15, 20 beers, waking up in a pile of vomit, going to different college towns, um, just no real regard for life, kind of just like risking it, and didn't really get in trouble. I was playing football, made it through the season, didn't enjoy it, didn't like where I was with the college and the football program, so I ended up transferring to a different school, a bigger school, and tried to play football there. And I went through 2 days, like camp, like training camp in the summer, and they go from it's like a 70-man roster down to like a 50-man roster, and the rest of the people can basically be like practice team players, and have a chance at it the next year. And this bigger school had scholarships, and I didn't have a scholarship. I was a walk on, and basically at the end of training camp, they said, hey, we like what your future looks like, and we think you can be a contributor of the team, but this year, you're not going to suit up for home games. And at that point, I didn't like the direction of that team or where it was going. And I said, you know what, I think my football career is over. I went through high school. I tried 2 different college programs, and I gave it up. And that's really when the drinking kind of went up another notch. Because now I don't have that pillar of sports to kind of keep me honed in and centralized. And that next year and semester at college was a complete waste. Drinking most nights throughout the week. I went on a 29-day bender with one of my friends, and just real erratic behavior.
Did you say 29-day bender? 29 days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
29 days.
As you do, isn't it? Yeah.
Heavily. And it goes away the next day by cracking up another one. And
man.
Just not making good decisions. Throughout that time, I ended up wrecking a car into like a 50-foot ravine coming back to school. That second semester, I ended up just burning my books, not going to finals, and dropping out, and just saying, this isn't for me. I changed my major, like I mentioned, like 3 or 4 different times. Didn't know what I wanted to do, so I ended up back home in my small, little bedroom that I grew up on, and I had a job coming back to that. I was working summers. It was with people over the age of 18 with mental disabilities, and really enjoyed that job. It was fulfilling. It felt good, but unfortunately, now I'm what you would call like a loser. Like I'm, sitting at home and drop out. Everybody else is still away at college, and I'm living at home. And a couple other buddies that didn't go to college, I met up with them, and we drank a lot. And every weekend, we were going to different college towns that our friends are at. Where basically that started Friday, all night Friday, wake up Saturday morning, all day Saturday. Well, till I pass out like at noon, wake back up, drink again, and then drinking throughout the week. And it took me a couple times of either no call, no shows, or showing up late where they finally let go of me and fired me and said, you don't have a job anymore. I said, okay. And found a labor landscaping construction job where I'm weed whacking cemeteries in a small town. And I come from a small area where everybody knows everybody. I graduated like 98 kids. The town is 5,000 people, 1 stoplight. And that's really where pretty much we're hitting max capacity of drinking.
Hello, guys. Hope you're enjoying this week's episode. Just a quick break here. I want to ask you a big favour. If you are enjoying the show, enjoying the episode, enjoying the podcast, can you please subscribe, please like, please share? I just want to let you know how important that is. The bigger this channel gets, the more people that see it, means that we can affect people's sobriety in a positive way, their addiction recovery. We might change a life, we might save a life. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you.
For about 3 years, every single weekend, blacking out to just run. Where basically I'm working through the week just to get to the weekend to forget any responsibilities, any obligations. Got pulled over 2 different times at that point because of my drinking and my driving. Passed 2 sobriety tests, and then ended up getting a DUI. We call it Wild Turkey Wednesday over here. It's the night before Thanksgiving.
Right.
Everybody goes out, and it's a big drinking night. And I ended up getting a DUI that night. Really didn't change anything. I went through the program, and I was like, oh, I don't have a problem. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Did you think you had a problem at that point?
No, because I kept telling myself I can stop at any time. I'm just having fun, young 20s, not taking life serious. Just kind of going nowhere fast and being like kind of scaredly okay with it, because the amount of times that I drank and drove was
all the time,
hundreds and hundreds.
Same. Yeah,
putting my life in danger. And the one scare that I did have was one night we were drinking at this kid's house, and I was drinking a bunch of beer, and apparently I tipped back a big bottle of gin, and I don't remember anything, and I ended up waking up in the hospital, and I have a breathing tube down my throat, and my arms are strapped down, and my legs are strapped down in the hospital bed, and I can't move, and I see my mother's friend is sitting next to me, and I motioned to her to untie me, and because I can't talk. And she goes, "You're not going to pull out anything, are you?" And I'm like, and I shake my head no. And I have my hands free, and I motioned her to give me her cell phone so I could type something. And I go, "Did I get in a car accident?" And I show it to her, and she goes, "No." She goes, "You aspirated in your sleep." And I was like, "Huh?" And then the doctors came in, and they go, "Oh, he's awake. Let's pull it out." And they pull out my catheter, and they pull out the breathing tube, and all this like black phlegm and mucus, all this comes out. And I was in a coma for 3 days. I didn't know it. And
3 days, yeah, 3 days.
yeah, and my buddy's mom found me, luckily, in the middle of the night, completely covered in my own vomit. And her next door neighbor happened to be like an EMT, somebody that works for like the ambulance, first responder, and had an oxygen monitor and took my oxygen. I forget what it was, but it wasn't good. It was,
You're lucky
I don't
you're
know.
lucky to be alive then, Spencer, isn't it? From that episode alone.
Yeah, just from that. I mean, could have easily, and I puked before that,
Yep.
handful of times already in my sleep. Just luckily I was on my side those times, but this one, and once I pulled that out and I kind of like realized the magnitude of the situation,
Right.
it was scary. I mean, it was
Yep.
definitely like a wake up call at that moment. People are coming in because it was not really talked about too much. It was just, as far as my drinking, it was definitely like, I knew, kind of like a notch up, but I almost wore that as like a patch on my sleeve, like
Right.
almost
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
an
Okay.
honor. Like, that's what I'm known for. I have to live up to that
Of
expectation.
course.
People
And
are visiting me.
did no one approach you and say to you, listen, like what you're doing ain't normal, or you're drinking too much, or you got to calm down? Like not someone in the hospitals, but like any friends or any peers or anybody like that. Did anyone put it on you?
No, not really, because unfortunately, the old adage of kind of misery loves company, and people want to see you do well, but not better than them. And when they see me acting crazy or, one step worse or doing something that's embarrassing or not the norm, it makes them look good. It makes them almost feel good about their situation and their drinking and their career choice, where it justifies their actions. So yeah, not a lot of people, never really had like a sit down with anybody, to really, really bring it up. It was almost kind of, and I was immersed with other people, not doing too much either, and nothing against them or anything, but no, it was never brought up, that it should be. It's nobody's responsibility, but, from that point, I definitely knew like that was a problem, and I didn't
Yeah.
want to do that again. And
No, but you probably a bit scared then as well, weren't you?
oh yeah, that was scary.
You know
I
what I
didn't want to
mean?
drink. I mean, I definitely at that point definitely wasn't interested in it because I didn't want that to happen again. So it was about 3 months off. I went
3 months, yeah.
about,
Okay, you was scared then, man. Yeah.
yeah, it was about 90 days, and I went out to the bars and hung out with my buddies, and I just really didn't want anything to do with it because I knew, maybe subconsciously in the back of my mind, that I kind of don't really have a governor or control over this, and like
Yeah.
if I have that drink, I could end up there. But I didn't say or declare I had a problem, and I didn't declare or say like I'm done drinking forever or sobriety. It was just like I know I'm just not doing it right now. Like, I need a break. And eventually, I ended up going to a tailgate for a football game, and at that point, I started playing the mental gymnastics of, I think I'm ready. I think I've learned, and I'm disciplined now. And I mean, within 20, 30 minutes, I'm right back to the old Spencer, just the way I was. Like nothing changed.
Nothing changed. And then you
And
start justifying it again, then, didn't you? Well, I've had 90 days off. It don't matter if I just get drunk on this time and this that, and the other. Because to admit that you're powerless over it, to admit that you can't have one, to admit that you're not going to get in blackout again, it's admitting defeat, isn't it?
oh yeah, that's not, yeah, because once you open that door, and that's kind of how I saw it. It's like once I do that, then like there's no going back. So if
No,
I just
man.
keep that door shut, and let's just keep it going, because I couldn't fathom a world of me not drinking at a sporting event or a Friday night or a tailgate or whatever the case may be. There would be no alternate reality that I could potentially not drink at those. So I would never admit to myself there was any issue with this. Yeah, from that point, drinking pretty heavily, right back into the old ways. And I ended up meeting my now wife while I didn't have my license and I was on probation for my DUI. And happenstance, I actually got my DUI after my a coma, after I went to a coma, actually. Yeah, so that happened after that. Ended up meeting my wife, and we moved to Pittsburgh, so like an hour away from my buddies. I get this like new sales job, and I'm kind of moving in the right direction. We're living in the city, we're living together, but that alcohol, where it slowed down on the how often it was,
Mm-hmm.
but it would still go into excess every once in a
Yeah.
while. And the one time she had to go out of town for like a cheerleading, she coached cheerleading and had to go there for one of their events. And I was left to my own devices and found one of my buddies down in Pittsburgh. And I wasn't home when she showed up that night, and I was nowhere to be seen the next morning. And she started calling around. Nobody knew where I was or what happened. And she's calling hospitals. They don't have any record of me. She called the police station. They don't have any record of me. And finally, well, I end up waking up and I'm in jail and no real idea what happened. I'm there all day, going through their process, fingerprints, mugshot, hanging out with these people. They took my shoelaces and ended up getting bail. Had to call my one friend to come bail me out. It was like $100, and she picks me up, and I get told my charges, and it's aggravated assault against a police officer, public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, open container. I'm like, man, because that's a felony over here, is
Right.
aggravated
Yeah.
assault against
Yep.
a police officer. Like that, it's a big offense. And I finally was like starting to get my life in order. And at that point, I was still on my DUI probation, where if I got in trouble again, because Pennsylvania, where I got it, was pretty lenient on your first offense. Like if you get a DUI, and as long as you go through their steps, within that year, it gets taken off of your record. But you can't get in trouble within that first year. And within
Right.
that first year, I get arrested down in Pittsburgh, and I call my ARD officer, that is my DUI officer that I have to deal with. I'm gonna go, hey, I want to pay this off and be done with my DUI program. And he goes, oh, well, I saw you were just arrested this past Saturday. We have to wait to see what happens with that. And so I had to wait, and because if I ended up getting charged with that, then I get the full ramifications of the DUI, which would be like jail time and plus the felony with this arrest. And I'm just like, man, to myself, I'm like, I can't catch a break. I'm, not pity me, but just at the time I almost felt nothing. Like I was pretty good at just compartmentalizing it and forgetting it and like erasing whatever happened from my memory and just kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
moving on. And ended up coming up to the court date, and I'm sitting there waiting in court, and the police officer opens up the door and says, hey, Spencer Bland? And I go, yeah, that's me. He goes, hey, come here. And he takes me out in the hall and he goes, hey, I'm the one that arrested you that night. You probably don't remember, but I don't want to ruin your life over this. If you do, there's like 25 hours of community service, we'll get this taken care of. And I
Wow.
was like, absolutely, I'll do
Wow.
that.
Wow.
And luckily I was able to do that. And because my wife got a job offer in Reno, Nevada, which is across the country. And we planned on taking that to almost get like another fresh start, like
Yeah, mate.
completely get
Yeah.
out of Pennsylvania. And luckily I was able to get through that community service, get that taken care of, and then get off my DUI probation and essentially a complete clean start, luckily. And we ended up moving to Reno, and I ended up getting engaged to my wife at that time. And my crux at this time was where I could control when I drank. Like I was able to narrow it down to like only the weekends or like only events where, we played the justification game, or
Yeah, but
I'm not,
Spencer,
I'm not,
was you
yeah.
controlling it because of your fiance? Was you controlling it because you knew that if you didn't, you'd lose her?
It was almost like looking back, it was something in the back of my mind that I wanted more, and I wanted a good life. I did, I wanted to be successful. I almost had this picture, this like avatar of who I was supposed to be, and I wanted to have a good career and be a good person. And the alcohol just kept pulling me back. But I was like, I know I don't want that, but I want something. I don't want to act like that. And it definitely was getting out of that situation, and definitely her being there, because I didn't want her to leave, but it was more about selfishly about me trying to get this thing controlled,
Yeah,
like
I get
trying
that.
to without giving it up, and I tried to corral that. We ended up getting engaged, and then my job moved us to, and the drinking got better, where I'm not doing it like as often, or the slip ups weren't as bad, because sometimes I could moderate it. Sometimes I could just have a couple drinks, but other times I would go off the rails. We ended up moving to Denver, Colorado, in the middle of the country, and we ended up getting married. And I kept saying, like, when I get married, I'll get it under control, or when I'm
Right.
25, I'll get it under control. When I have my first kid, the pieces are just going to fall into
Bang,
place.
bang, bang, bang. Keeps moving. Them goalposts keep moving, don't they?
Yeah, and it never did. Basically, once I moved out, that's kind of when I was able to only have a couple every once in a while. But once we got married, I ended up, blacking out at our engagement that I did, blacking out at,
Oh,
our
yeah.
wedding.
Yep.
Just, it was like playing Russian roulette every time.
Yeah, man.
But I would justify it by saying, sometimes I can control it. And then we ended up moving here to North Carolina, and I had a son at the time, and I was still drinking. And then we had our daughter. I'm still drinking, like socially, but I would find myself drinking, on the weekends as well, drinking by myself. And it was not this past summer, but the summer previously. So coming up this June will be 2 years of my sobriety. So it was about 2 summers ago when a couple of my buddies, I'm 30 years old now, and a couple of years ago, my buddies were getting married, kind of coming of age of like getting married and having kids. And I had to go back up to Pennsylvania for a couple bachelor parties and a couple weddings. And one of them, well, obviously the bachelor party, my wife wasn't there. And my plan going up, I'm talking to myself because I'm still drinking at the time. I go, I want to remember this. I want to have fun. I want to drink, but like internally, I'm like, I don't want to black out. And without fail, ended up, blacking out, drinking way more. I mean, nothing bad happened, but I don't remember much of it. Passing out early, and I have to make it's about an 11-hour drive back down. And I remember driving back Sunday morning and hungover, feeling terrible, and just beat myself up. Like, man, why? Why did that happen again? Like, I didn't want that to happen. And then that friend ended up getting married a month or two later up in Pennsylvania, so I had to drive back up. And the same thing, my wife wasn't able to go to that because she had a bachelorette party in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm alone again, and I'm driving up, and I have the pep talk with myself again. I don't want to black out. I want to be there for my friend. I want to remember this. I want, catching up with a bunch of people. And without fail, ended up blacking out, not remembering much, and making that same repeat drive back down, beating myself up, like, why'd it happen? Why'd it happen again? And after that, it was last summer, we're building our like dream house. I have 2 kids, I have a beautiful wife, and I'm doing well in my career. Everything on the outside looks like it's
Yeah.
fine, and if you rated it, like, I'm doing okay, and that justification, I'm doing better than so and so or whatever. I'm allowed to have a drink. I work hard, that whole type of thing. And
How do you feel on the inside, Spencer? When you're looking good on the outside, how do you genuinely feel inside? What's your head like then, right then?
then hated myself with being a fraud,
Yeah, man.
not having self confidence or um, self esteem because I've lied to myself so many times. I've let myself down so many times where I've said, I'm not going to drink this much tonight, or these games I would play with myself where I'm only having 6 beers tonight. I would blow past that, or I'm only going to have one every hour. I'd blow past that, or I'm going to have three and then one every hour, and I'd blow past that. And, waking up that next day, let myself down, and playing sports, and, after sports, I try to stay fit and work out and say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to work out, or I'm going to, eat better. And it just compounds on itself where I had no credibility with myself. I knew I internally was full of it,
Yeah.
but on the outside, trying to put on some facade like I have it all together, but internally just rotting. And from that, that's for whatever reason, my drinking just kind of started to escalate a little bit more. I think it was just a compound of feeling those internal emotions. Like on the outside, everything looks great. That's where, I mean, you hear like celebrities or people, millionaires kill themselves because like on the outside, they think,
Yeah.
everything's fine. But like on the inside, I don't believe myself. I don't trust myself. I let myself down, and I start to like sneak sneak drinks a lot more. I always have before, where I try not to make it as noticeable, but I mean, blatantly for no reason, going out to the garage or staying out to walk the dog and going out and finishing a beer, grabbing two more, finishing
Sure,
one,
yeah.
coming back with what she might think is the first one that I had, or, being at events and saying I have to go to the restroom while I run to the bar and slug two more, and just the pull, the gravitational pull that I felt like it was having over me was becoming more intense. And I was noticing it, with my kids. They were young at the time, 3 and 1, and they only get to see me on the weekends. And I'm either, fixated on trying to get another drink, or I'm recovering from the night before and I don't want anything really to do with them. And I'm pushing it off, saying like, at least I'm around, at least I'm not like my dad, all those mental gymnastics that we do. And it was just really out of nowhere. It was after, basically that summer, and I'm driving in my work truck and like just look up in the sky, and I don't know what it was. It was just finally I admitted and said like, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if I have a problem, but I just know that I have no control over this. And this alcohol has control over me. At the end of the day, sometimes I can rear it in, but you do it enough times, it's going to win. It's kind of like the casino. And at that point was when I finally admitted to myself that this isn't okay.
And you surrendered then, didn't you, Spence? You surrendered that day.
Yep. Yeah, that was
See, the thing is, right, so to our listeners and to our viewers out there, right, when you have that moment, like right back at the beginning when you started drinking and you got that euphoria feeling and then you said the nerve endings in the brain and all that, yeah, that's one feeling. And then when you get to the end and we talk about alcoholism like you've just described it and the strength, the pull and the hold it's got on you, and when you have that feeling that you had there, that's a similar feeling to the bit at the beginning, because like even though it's hard when you have that realization, there's a piece of hope there as well, isn't there?
yeah. It was a weight. It was
Yeah.
lifted off my shoulders. It was like, I don't know. Finally, yeah, this hold was released, off of me, and it was just like, wow, like, yeah, just this weight, this immense weight came off, and from that moment, I went home and sat down with my wife, and that's when I told her about it, and I said, I
Wow.
think I have a problem here. I don't think I have control over it, and she was kind of shocked by it. She doesn't drink much at all. Very occasional, randomly, she'll have like half a glass of wine or something. It doesn't even enter her mind that like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Friday, you should drink, type of thing.
Normal, normal temperate drinker.
Yeah, and she was like, "Wow, this is a big moment for you.
Yeah.
This is big." And I said, "Yeah, I think I need to stop." And she goes, "Okay, well, what do you want me to do if you want to drink?" And I said, "I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we do." And being down here in North Carolina, I don't have a lot of my old buddies or like triggers around, so I wasn't going out to the bars, so I wasn't exposed to a lot of it. So from that time, for the first couple of weeks, I'm sitting at home and I'm sober and I'm drinking. I'm starting to feel better. I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. And but I'm not around any of that. And my other friend was getting married, so we have to go back up. Now this time, my wife and I are going together, and we're driving up. I brought a couple NA beers and I brought a couple cigars and was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think I'm not going to drink. I told one of my friends, hey, I think I'm not going to drink at this. He goes, yeah, that's fine. I mean, he didn't care at all. And when I went into it, it was my first experience of not um, drinking in like a main social event where, since the age of 15 to 29, every single event I went to, I used alcohol as a crutch to deal with that social anxiety or, those nerves. So I go there and it was very uncomfortable with my best friends that I've been around for years to even just sit there. I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't small talk. They're kind of talking. I felt like they were looking at me, looking into my soul, like, why is he not drinking? And I'm just in my head. I'm not in the environment,
Yeah.
and I'm not soaking up the smells and the food and the
Nothing.
experience. I'm just inside my head negotiating,
It's painful, isn't it?
back
It's
and
a
forth.
painful place to
Yeah,
be, because you're like, in reality, it's self-obsessed. You're thinking about yourself all the time, and that paranoia is there, isn't it? And it's like you say, everyone's looking at me, and you want to. I don't know. It's kind of like you one, you don't want to be there, but two, you just want to crawl up and just hide in a corner, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. And I walked away and had like an NA beer out by the car and was just like white knuckling this thing and really
Yeah,
didn't know
mate.
how to navigate it at all. And sitting in that spot, I sit back down and the negotiating back and forth. You can have a beer, like it's not a big deal. It's your friend's wedding. You haven't seen these guys in a while. This is it's a big event. This only happens once in a lifetime. You can have a couple. Go ahead. And eventually that sound won. And I walked up to my wife and said, "Hey, I think I'm gonna have a couple." And she goes, "Okay." And I go up there, grab a beer, and just like that, right back to it.
Boom.
Beer after beer, going
Yeah,
back and forth, back and forth. And now I'm the life of the party,
of
and
course.
everything is smooth. I'm talking to everybody and BSing, and then
Yeah.
at the very end, because she was hanging out with some of the girls, and I was like with some of the guys, and she comes up, she goes, "Hey, it's the last dance. I want to dance with you. It's the last song." And I said, "Okay." And then I hear over my shoulder, "Last call" at the bar. And I do a beeline, turn around, leave her in the dust, and run to go grab another beer. I already have one in my hand. I already have a full one. I definitely don't need another one.
No, no.
And she comes chasing after me and looks me like into my soul and goes, "I'm losing you. I have no control over you. You have no control over this." And we got into a big fight. From that point, that night, it was a big fight, and we drove 11 hours down, her and I together. Um, I'm crying because like now it's all on the table because I've admitted, now I have to deal with this because before I could stifle it or get passive aggressive or uh, denial or defensive, but now this is real and I have to live with this. And at that point, I said, I'm done. I'm digging my heels in. She said, if you drink again, I'm sending you to rehab.
Right.
That drive down, I fully dove in to sobriety. I didn't know where it was going to go or where it was going to take or, the rest of my days or events or years or life, but I knew that like I need this or I'm going to lose everything at some
Yeah, man.
point. I'm going to lose my wife. I'm going to lose my kids. I could lose my life, lose a career because I've lost stuff before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of time. If I play it out long enough, it could be next week, next month, next year. It might not be tomorrow, but at some point it's
Yeah,
going to win.
man.
And
So, Spence, have you not had a drink since that day?
from that day, that was
From
it.
that
That was
day?
my sobriety day right there, June 26th.
Well, listen, firstly,
Yeah.
congratulations massively because like I said to you earlier, I respect that like you wouldn't believe because this is not a game, this is tricky. When I say tricky, that's even an understatement. It's fucking hard. When you're dogged with addiction and alcoholism, to stop drinking and live a life without it, like is outstanding. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. So massive congratulations there. But how did you do it? What have you done to change your life, to change your thought processes? What did you do? What did you embark on? How are you sober?
So what I did was fully committed to that where going into it, when I admitted like I have a problem here, I dipped my toe into sobriety. I said, "Oh, I think I should stop drinking, or I probably should. Like it probably would be in my best interest. I think I'm going to be done." And so when I went into that wedding, that was on the table. Drinking, it was a possibility. It was a negotiation. So from that moment, I turned the switch into it not being a negotiation. There is no other options. There's one option here, and I'm fully committing to it. And from that point, for about a year, I went, you call it dark. I didn't go out. I didn't go to events. I didn't go to, up to Pennsylvania. We didn't have anything going on really. I just did the self work and looking back into my past and addressing things
Yeah, yeah.
I might have stifled before and
You kid.
did a lot of personal development, personal
Good.
work leaning on health and fitness and wellness and, just realizing and using that as an anchor and a pillar that alcohol is not healthy.
Yeah, man.
It's not good for your sleep. It's not good for overall health in general and really leaning into that and doing the breath work and doing the meditations and learning how to navigate this life with myself and getting comfortable with myself in my own skin because I wasn't, comfortable with myself. And slowly, with each event we would go to, getting more and more comfortable navigating a social event without alcohol that I was so used to using and putting in those little steps one at a time. And with that, building that credibility, that confidence, that self-esteem with yourself,
Yeah.
you become bulletproof, and it's freeing to lay out my dirty laundry and baggage because I got nothing to
Yeah.
hide. I'll tell, my story to whoever, because I know everybody else has their story. They have their dirty laundry they don't want out, and they might act like they're high and moral, but everybody's got things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being content with that.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, Spencer. Listen, your story that you've shared with me today, obviously, then sharing with whoever listens to the world, yeah, is you say that you're happy to do that. Not everyone's happy to do that, right? So even that's a high level of respect, because it's not just a standard story. To you, it's your story. You might look at it and think, you know what? Like you said to me earlier, other people have had it tougher. That's a tough story, man. So to come to where you're at now, it's beautiful. Do you know what I mean? It genuinely is beautiful. And I do believe that people who have suffered traumatic experiences in their childhood, who listen and watch this podcast, will get hope from listening to you, because you cannot not.
That's awesome. Thank you. And that's all it is at the end of the day. What I'm trying to do is spread my story, my message, hoping that it reaches people. Because at first, for most of the time, I felt like I was alone, in this, or like, you hear alcoholism or being an alcoholic or having alcohol problems. We feel alone and secluded. And there's a lot of people out there, and that's another message, is trying to battle this alcohol culture that's so entrenched in the UK and in the US, where everything revolves around alcohol. And there's people like me and yourself that are trying to navigate this world that has us set up for failure. And nobody else is saying it. They'll just let you die on the spear by yourself.
Yep, definitely. And we're here doing the opposite, man, because we've been through them dark times. We know that ain't the way to live. Spencer, I've got one last question for you, and it's a question that I ask all my guests. Now, if you've got someone new to sobriety, or looking at becoming sober, or struggling in early days or long-term sobriety, and you can give them one piece of advice to leave them with, what would it be?
I would say the one piece of advice is keep the promises you make to yourself, no matter how simple they are, where it has a compounding effect. From telling yourself you're going to do the laundry when you get home from work, and if you don't do the laundry, you lose credibility with yourself, and you reinforce in your mind that you are a liar. And when you say that you're not going to drink this Friday, you can let yourself off the hook, because you already let yourself off the hook by not doing the laundry.
Yeah, I get that.
So every little promise, something that you say to yourself, make sure you keep that promise with yourself, no matter how little it is, because it compounds and you build that credibility. And then when you say something, you mean it, you can follow through with it, because so many people let themselves down.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Spencer, wicked. Listen, thank you for coming on the Sober Stew podcast.
No problem at all. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. It was fun. It was a blast.
It's beautiful. And thank you for sharing your story as well.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Guys, I hope you're enjoying the Sober Stew podcast and the episode today. Listen, I'm asking for a massive favour here. If you like the show, you like the podcast, and you feel like you're getting relevant content from it, please like and subscribe and share the channel, yeah? The way I see this is, the more people know about this channel, the more chance we've got of spreading the message of recovery. And that might change one person's life. And if we do, that's enough. But let's look at it in a different way. If we save one person's life, that's massive. Please like, share, subscribe. God bless.
Be the best I could be and achieve my dreams. They ain't really been where I've been. They ain't seen what I seen. They ain't felt what I felt. And the smartest thing I done was reach out for help. Now I'm flying by myself.